Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first edition of our European Conference on Security and Authentication. We're pleased to have Suyin Arts as our host and moderator for this conference. Suyin is based in Belgium. She is a seasoned TV presenter, keynote speaker, and business leader. Let's welcome Suyin.
Thank you so much for this nice introduction, Stephanie. Very welcome from my side. I am indeed Suyin Arts, your host and moderator, and I'm really delighted to be so. And I'm very curious to hear everything that we are going to learn today. This event is organized by Cromnix, a marketplace to connect European tech providers with international corporate buyers. And the idea is to match tech needs with relevant solutions. And I will introduce our next speaker that is up right now. And that is Gal Steinberg, Vice President Product of Keyless with headquarters in London, but also offices in Rome and Singapore. That sounds really great. Gal, you will talk about the secure and frictionless biometric authentication for consumers. And welcome to you, Gal, in our webinar, in our events. And maybe to start, could you tell us a bit more about Keyless, and feel free to share your slides, of course, yourself.
Yes, very, very happy to. And thank you, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. So as mentioned, my name is Gal Steinberg. I'm based in Tel Aviv in Israel. And I look over product management for Keyless. And I'm going to share some slides here, which hopefully you can see now.
Yes, I can see your slides. That's perfect.
Great. So maybe a couple words about Keyless before we get going. And the focus of this talk is more about the consumer side of authentication as opposed to workforce authentication, just to set the scene. So Keyless, we are a deep tech identity company, and we develop what we call the next generation privacy enhancing biometric authentication solutions that combine biometrics and advanced cryptography to enable a situation where we do not need to store or process biometric data at all for biometric authentication. Some admin related information. We are a team of over 50 today, distributed across Europe with headquarters in the UK, in London. Our technology is based on over 10 years of research in the academia in the fields of cryptography and biometrics, as mentioned. And again, we have a large set of our employees are actually PhDs in these domains. And we're trusted by some of the leading identity providers, which we work with, as you can see on the right side of the screen, such as Microsoft, Okta, OneLogin, which we have a partnership and integration with. What is the goal of Keyless, and why do we have our products out there, right? So we want to solve this long-lasting trade-off in the authentication space between friction or simplicity, user experience, fraud and security, and costs, where compliance and regulation is always hovering in the background. And this has been a trade-off in the authentication space for quite some time. And what we've seen when talking with our prospects and our customers is that until now, basically they were told, you have to choose 2 out of 3 when you look for an authentication solutions, right? So you can find an authentication solution that can provide good friction or user experience and reduce fraud, but that would be costly or wouldn't be private by design. Or you can find a solution that would be not expensive, but then, maybe it's not as fraud resistant as you would want it to be. And what we believe is that we have a solution that can cover all 3 of these points in the trade-off without compromising on one for the other. And yeah, before kind of going into the kind of what are the options out there today, I think, which is an important topic, I want to touch upon the compliance and the regulation aspect today, especially in Europe, right? So we have 2 main streams of compliance. One is GDPR, especially when you talk about biometrics, right? How do you make sure you implement a solution that is compliant with GDPR, privacy, etc.? And the other one is what we call PSD2, and specifically PSD2 strong customer authentication, which relates to financial institutions and basically is a requirement for any issuer or payment provider to provide multi-factor authentication and some other things as part of the authentication that it provides to the consumer. And this is something that we want to cover. We believe that we cover with our solution as built-in, right? So GDPR compliance, exceeding GDPR compliance because we don't store or process biometric data, but also offering a solution that is PSD2, strong customer authentication enabling. So that's kind of keyless in a word.
Okay. What I wonder is there are several face biometric solutions that are out there on the market. How different would you be compared to them?
Yeah, good question. Exactly what I was going to cover. So to understand, kind of to answer this, let's look at the evolution of authentication and where we are today and the options, right? So we started off in the 1960s with passwords, username and password as a knowledge factor. Unfortunately, these still exist today, although they're not very secure. And the evolution of the passwords were into these hard tokens that you put on your key chain or physical card as seen here on the image, which provided better security, but the user experience and the cost was not perfect. So the world evolved into what we call soft tokens. These are mobile apps that you get a push notification to, you get a 6-digit PIN code, you put it in your browser and you're in, or through an SMS, right? And that sometimes is not the best user experience either, because sometimes the SMS doesn't arrive, sometimes it arrives after 5 minutes, and there are attacks like SIM swapping, making it not the most secure method. So then we introduced biometrics, and a lot of us use Face ID today, or if you have a Samsung phone, a fingerprint. It's very convenient. It's very easy to use. We'll talk about that in a minute. And basically, it's becoming more and more mainstream. But we believe that the way biometrics are done today in the world, and we can talk about the two options very, very soon, there are some limitations around how privacy, security, and user experience is managed, and this is what we aim to solve. So maybe talk about kind of why biometrics and the solutions regarding biometrics out there. Why are biometrics good? One, they provide a good user experience, right? You can get you could get into a service, you can log in, a good user experience by just looking into the camera, for example, with face biometrics, right? I just look into my phone, I access my bank account. Pretty easy, easy to use. Two, it provides strong identity assurance. If it's my face, it's only my face, as opposed, for example, to a password that is shareable. Biometrics are the highest level of assurance that you can give as an authentication factor, what we call an inherence factor. Biometrics are applicable to anywhere and to anyone, right? So if you talk about face biometrics, usually people have their face on them, and usually they have it anywhere and at any time, so they can use it to access services, as opposed to maybe these hard tokens that you have to put on your keychain, where you not necessarily have them all the time. You forget them at home, you forget them at work, etc. We talked about not being able to share the face, right? There's no notion of password reuse. I cannot give my Netflix password, my face to my friend who can log into my Netflix account on my behalf. And it's rather low operational cost, right? It's not very expensive to implement biometrics, to integrate it into existing systems, but also the operational cost, as opposed to maybe SMSs, where you have to pay for each authentication, which may be a bit more expensive. So going back to the options of biometrics out there today, what we see in the world are two main options, right? Just to answer the question. One is what we call local biometric authentication. And this you may think of as Face ID, right? And that is a great technology. It provides good user experience, but there are some downsides. Why? Because the biometrics are stored on your mobile device. What happens if you lose your device? You lose your biometric template with it, right? If you lose your face, it's hard to replace your face. If you lose your password, you can replace the password. That becomes an issue, right? Another issue is that Face ID and the built-in biometric sensors don't exist on all devices, right? I have an iPhone 7, it doesn't have Face ID. So how do you cover all users if they don't have all the appropriate phones and devices? The other aspect is the portability issue, right? We talked about that in the past. What happens if I have more than one device? I have an iPhone, an Android, a tablet. One supports finger, one supports Face ID, one doesn't support any. So I have different representations of the same me across different devices. And so that's the first one, local biometric authentication. And the other option out there are what we call centralized biometric authentication. This basically means that we store, or vendors or support to store the biometric template in a central database in the cloud, on-premise, private cloud, doesn't matter. The idea that it's the biometric template, which is, or biometric data, which is the most sensitive kind of information, is stored in one database. And that creates a honeypot for attackers in a way that is insecure, I would claim, and is not private by design. Private by design means that as a user, I am not control over my biometrics because the vendor that stores this in their database has control over the biometrics, even if it's hashed, encrypted, and so on.
Okay, and how accurate would then face biometrics be in terms of performance?
Right. So maybe just before skipping into the accuracy, just one more explanation on how we differentiate and how we provide a solution that is different, and then I'll answer the question. So the way we look at it is that biometrics can be distributed to provide multi-factor authentication. What we mean is that basically we capture the face, run liveness anti-spoofing to make sure that it's a real human being, not an image, not a mask, not a video. And then we split the biometrics that are encrypted into multiple shares that are stored in different independent nodes in the keyless network. So at no single point in time is the biometric template stored in one place. We also don't process biometric data because when the user authenticates using a technology that is called secure multi-party computation and zero knowledge proofs, these nodes can communicate with one another to tell each other that they have the right piece without revealing any biometric data, any PII between them. And this algorithm, combined with a key that is stored on the device to enable the possession factor as part of the MFA, provides us strong multi-factor authentication that combines two factors: biometrics, inheritance factor, and possession factor. And this is really the uniqueness, and this is why we don't store or process biometric data anywhere and comply with GDPR, PSD2, and so on.
Okay, I'm checking the time a little bit. So could you tell us a little bit more about the performance, but maybe speed up the pace a little bit so we keep on timing. I know it's a short moment, but go ahead.
No worries, no worries at all. So basically, yeah, we've done a lot of internal and external evaluation on our performance. You can see some of the certifications that we have from FIDO, which is the leading kind of passwordless authentication alliance in the world. We've also run independent tests with labs such as FIME, F-I-M-E, a well-known lab that tested two things. One, the liveness anti-spoofing, and the other one is the accuracy, so false accept rate, false reject rate, and we passed all these kind of with distinction.
Okay, anything else on the performance you'd like to share with us?
Again, the performance we work across. First of all, I think there was a question in the previous call around NIST and standards, and one of the important things for us is that we comply with all the regulatory standards out there, such as NIST, such as FIDO, such as integrations with OpenID Connect, SAML, and so on. And of course, certify the way we do the biometrics and liveness to different independent labs that evaluate different criteria. So happy to share this information and the results that we have offline with anyone interested. It's publicly available.
Great, that's good. So people can, of course, reach out to you if they have personal questions about it. Let's maybe go to Stephanie to see whether we have some questions that came in for you already. Stephanie, do you have any questions that people asked in the chat at the moment?
Thank you, Gal. Yes. So just to clarify a little bit, Keyless is using which type of authentication? Because you mentioned about distributed biometrics, server-side biometrics. So which type of authentication, and why is it better than the other types of authentication?
Yeah, good question. So Keyless uses what we call distributed biometrics, and we believe that we are the first vendor out there with a solution that does this kind of biometrics, which is very different from server-side or local biometrics. And the main advantage is are that we can take the best of both of these worlds. We can take the best of server-side biometrics. We can take the good parts of local biometrics that we talked about in the past, combine them without taking the bad. So no security or privacy issues, no interoperability issues, no security, liveness issues, for example, and bring it all into a solution that, as you can see here, has a good user experience, provides high level of security, is compliant with GDPR or PSD2 strong customer authentication, and doesn't require high cost to implement and to operate.
Okay. Any other questions, Stephanie, that came in?
There's, hold on for a second. There's an insistent question about how are you different with the biometric solution of IDEMIA, ARIAD-NEXT? Same question that was asked earlier.
Right. So all of these vendors that were mentioned now and earlier, they do either server-side biometrics or local biometrics, or they provide both options. But none of them, to my knowledge, provide this distributed biometrics mechanism. And that basically is our differentiation, right? To my knowledge and my kind of research, we have brought this, we are the first to bring this from the academia or theory to a commercial use case, which we can actually, and we have shipped to multiple or many customers out there today in the financial sector mostly.
Thank you. Thank you, Gal.
Okay, indeed. Thank you so much. And please stay with us because maybe at the end there's more questions for you. Thank you for a very interesting presentation, Gal, and have a great day and please stay with us.